a society which was guided by moral, spiritual, and religious values, which virtues had brought us to this present heights that we enjoy. Most of us, Lord, and most of all, we thank Thee for this man who, with the unstinting aid of his life and helpmate Sadie, gave unselfishly of himself, his intelligence, and his means to bridge this dichotomous gap. He strove to make the people of his city and nation strong by standing fast and suffering long, while proclaiming justice, truth, and honor among all men through love. God of all souls, we give thanks, though in tears, for your gifts beyond Christ. And Lord, we most humbly pray that Thou wilt help us to keep these gifts unstained. Help, Lord, his wife, his children and their families, his friends, his colleagues, and all whom he touched and influenced, to use our talent as did Raymond Pace Alexander. Help us to commit ourselves to the making of things spiritual as expressed in art, literature, morals, and religion, and let us make the end we seek the achievement of the eternal city. Let us not become lost in a quest for material items solely, or become prey to reduced standards of morality. Help us, Lord, as we revere this name and the memory of this man throughout today, to gain a deeper faith in Thee, courage and strength, and never be unfaithful, any of us, in our quest for the Holy City. We ask these blessings in Thy holy name and for Thy sake.
of the Greater Germantown Theater, a program to rejuvenate and unite the Greater Germantown area, a program very close to the deep continuities and commitment that inspired his life. When Pat Clifford and I met with Sadie Alexander to plan and prepare for this memorial event, and I would like to say to all of you that Sadie Alexander's heart and hand has been in every aspect of this memorial tribute. She felt that it would be appropriate to have it in this place where the Alexanders often worship, and in this church, which is very close, as you know, to their home. When we asked her who she felt would be the most appropriate person to serve as the honorary chairman of this event, she said very quickly and with great enthusiasm, Bill Coleman. So we were delighted and very much gratified when he accepted this assignment as honorary chairman of this special memorial event. And I recall when Pat Clifford and I met with him at our first rather lengthy meeting, how pleased we were with the interest and the enthusiasm and the time that he has put into, first of all, selecting such a distinguished honorary committee, and then the various preparations that an event like this requires. And during that first rather lengthy meeting, I remember that he only allowed 2 telephone calls to interrupt his concentration. One from his son, and another from the Winter White House in Vail, Colorado. It was later that we discovered what that was about. And so, it is with great honor and great pleasure that I present to you the honorary chairman of this memorial tribute, Mr. William T. Coleman, Jr., Esquire. Coleman.
Sadie, Ray Pace, Mary Elizabeth, the other members of the Alexander's family. It's my pleasure to introduce the principal speaker. I guess you all realize it would be a travesty of super immigration to have to introduce Leon Higginbotham to the audience of lawyers, citizens of Germantown, or in fact anyone who has concern with the quality of life in the United States. Those of us who were at the trial bar, thank God that he soon left the trial bar and became a judge, because he was certainly by far one of the outstanding trial lawyers. I remember the only research I've ever helped Leon to do was trying to point out that there were judges under 40 that had been appointed to the bench, and we had to do a memorandum which President Kennedy apparently read, and I think it had some effect. United States District Judge, trustee of 2 great universities, trustee of the Smithsonian Institute, yet time to teach, to inspire. He's been a great friend, a great neighbor, and Sadie and Leon, you can imagine my restraint when I now sit down without saying anything about Judge Alexander, who we all love, but it was a tremendous consensus that you could say it better and with more verb and better than any of the rest of us.
Mr. Alexander, and I would like to say the grandchildren, Colonel and Mrs. Brown, still calling it is significant that Reagan had many sons. I think he looked upon them I think that also it is particularly appropriate today that we honor Judge Alexander in connection with the movement which can revitalize Germantown and make this present setting even more illustrious than its noble past. For both the judge and this larger community have had a distinctive personality, plus many other virtues which are essential to improving the quality of life in our society. While my esteem for Judge Alexander has been unlimited, I will not repeat the litany of well-deserved honors and the innumerable firsts, though all were important. As we face the always uncertain future, we should ask, what were his distinctive qualities which left such an irrevocable impact? On each of us who had the privilege of knowing him, first, and perhaps above all else, was his dramatic capacity to recognize the individuality of each person, so that at the moment of conversation, one felt the judge's attention was exclusively riveted on him or her or the institution at issue. In these days of computerization, systems, and statistical norms, it is so easy to forget one's individual dignity, one's individual uniqueness. Now, in the process of these exchanges, maybe some may have viewed Judge Alexander's enthusiasm as even slightly excessive, or maybe even verbose. However, if that is the facet they recall, they've totally missed his absolute genius. For his pervasive enthusiasm was a mechanism in letting each person know that the judge intensely recognized and appreciated each one's individuality. I shall never forget the first time I met him. When I was a student at Yale in 1951, as a student in a moot court argument where the good judge, who unfortunately then was not a judge, but a city councilman, presided. I wrote a kind but rather perfunctory one-paragraph letter expressing my appreciation for his coming to Yale. Gussie smiles. She knows what I'm going to say. By return mail, I received a single-space, 2 1/2 page letter, which not only lavishly praised me as counsel at the trial, but even ended up complimenting me on my typing. And thus, that is typical of the great judge. He was keenly interested in world peace and played an important part in that movement, which had been initiated by Chief Justice Earl Warren. And I trust that sometime some profound historian will take time to write the extraordinary history of Judge Alexander and all of the things he did, not only locally but nationally and for the cause of world peace. And again, I remember in 1973, he sent me a 2-page letter asking me to appear at an international conference at Abidjan on a panel on legal education which he would be chairing. After advising him of my inability to attend, again, unfortunately, with a 1-paragraph response, the next day I got a 4-page reply noting his deep regret, but most important of all, stressing how much the conference meant to peace, to mankind. And we've all had those experiences with him. And on reflection, they were most meaningful. For we know so many other individuals of high competence who are nothing more than mechanical robots in their aloof dealings with their fellow persons. Sometimes these robot personalities profess great concern about the masses, as they nevertheless remain totally oblivious to their offensiveness and insensitivity to practically every individual they touched. But in contrast, Judge Alexander saw the dignity and individuality of us all. The elevator operator, the porter, the clerk, the bailiff. It was a dramatic experience to follow him entering City Hall, as he greeted each person so eloquently and magnificently, asking them about their children, who was going to college, how's your cold, and everyone felt that they were a part of the justice system. I talked to a couple of the bailiffs who had the honor to serve at Judge Alexander's funeral. And they told me how meaningful it was, because more so than any other judge they had ever known, he recognized each one in the process of the trial and the tensions of the moment. Thus, one of his qualities which we must perpetuate is the recognition of the separate individuality and dignity of all persons. But we are here today for even a far more significant purpose than recognizing the force of his always dramatic personality. More important, we are here to look at both the Germantown community and Judge Alexander to ask, what extraordinary qualities are there in each which we should extrapolate and apply to the future? It is significant that among all of the colonies, the first protest against slavery occurred where? In this Germantown community. For as Columbia Professor Commager has assured us, it was written by the resolution of the Germantown Mennonites on February 18, 1688, at a monthly meeting at Richard Worley's, where they stated their resolution by saying, quote, "These are the reasons why we are against the traffic of men body as follows. Is there any that would be done or handled at this manner, namely, to be sold or made a slave for all of the time of his life? For we hear that the most part of such Negroes are brought hither against their will and consent, and that many of them are stolen. Now, though they are black, we cannot conceive there is more liberty to have them slaves as it is to have other white ones. There is a saying that we should do to all men like as we will be done ourselves, making no difference of whatever generation, descent, or color they are. And those who steal or rob men, and those who buy or purchase them, are they not all alike? Here is liberty of conscience, which is right and reasonable, and here ought to be likewise liberty of the body. But to bring men hither or to rob and sell them against their will, we stand against." And they concluded their resolution by saying, "Have these poor Negroes not as much right to fight for their freedom as you have to keep them slaves?" Today, 287 years later, we must indicate in this community where that profound original resolution was written, the same type of humanitarian concerns which the Mennonites expressed in 1688, that we should do to all men as we will be done ourselves. Judge Alexander understood the profundity of the Mennonites' message, and his entire career exemplified it. We honor him today because of the storms he faced in his life, for his tenacious redirecting of these seemingly malignant forces to the brighter days he saw and made possible for all mankind. All of us know those storms. The loss of a mother at a very early age, persistent racial deprivation, pervasive poverty, and most of all, the apathy of a society which more often than not failed to dream things that never were and accepted the agonies of the decades without either indignation or hope. In March of 1965, Chief Justice Earl Warren spoke on the death of Justice Frankfurter. He said, "We mourn his passing, both as our associate and friend. We also know that his ebullient spirit would want us to get on with our always unfinished work." As Justice Warren spoke of Justice Frankfurter, today we must focus, at least briefly, on the agenda of our unfinished task, to which Judge Alexander dedicated himself, and to which each of us must now be even more committed. From the 1930s to the 1950s, Judge Alexander stayed on the cutting edge of civil rights litigation. His persistent legal skills opened up hotels, theaters, restaurants. His impact on education was extraordinary. I remember in 1955 when I filed a civil rights suit in Montgomery County and Penland to attempt to eliminate segregation there. I found the leading case had been established by Judge Alexander in Berwyn in the 1920s, which incidentally involved getting my secretary admitted to an integrated school in Berlin. The Girard College case is another example of the thrust he initiated. For despite popular legend, it was Judge Alexander who in the 1950s first initiated the Girard College litigation and stayed with it throughout the first round. And while during this early series of cases, they did not get the ultimate judicial decree they deserved, it was for another generation, again the nexus of generations, led by Bill Pullman and the federal courts, where men like Judge Van Dusen presided and Chief Judge Lord, where the final decree was obtained to make it possible for thousands of black orphans to be the beneficiary of Girard College education. And but for Judge Alexander's tenaciousness, maybe the ultimate victory would never have been obtained. There's also much we can learn and profit from the style and manner in which he faced these problems of racial deprivation, for he left to all of us a legacy of understanding and goodwill to all persons. He was able to perceive that in blacks seeking their equality under the law, it must always be presented in a fashion totally devoid of hatred. He envisioned a city, a state, indeed a nation and a world which helped all of its citizens. And thus by his life, he rejected the divisiveness, the polarization, or the hatred, whether it was espoused by the powerful or the weak, blacks or whites, lawyers or educators, captains of industry or leaders of labor. And let us today again say we will rededicate ourselves to the unfinished task of building a city, a state, and a nation where all men and women are respected with total dignity as individuals without antagonism because of race or religion or national origin or their station in life. There was another facet of Judge Alexander, and that was that he understood the profundity and the necessity of struggle. He knew that essential change could not come about if we were to have on one hand a silent majority and on the other hand a silent minority. Thus, within a framework of nonviolence, he understood what Frederick Douglass, a slave, meant when speaking more than 100 years ago. It was Douglass who said, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will." Douglass went on to say, "Let me give you a word of the philosophy of reform. The whole history of progress of human liberty shows that all concessions yet made to her august claims have been born of earnest struggle. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its mighty waters. Power, I repeat again, concedes nothing without a demand. Find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows, or with both. And Douglass ended up with this message, which was part of Raymond's life. He knew it and he practiced it. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. Thus, Judge Alexander recognized that it was the role of the concerned citizen to oppose tyranny, of course in a nonviolent fashion, for without that opposition, things would never change. There are so many other legacies of Judge Alexander that I cannot do justice to them, and that's why I've encouraged Mrs. Alexander time and time and time again, the utter necessity of writing a profound historical volume on his life as well as hers. But he understood the legacy of excellence. When I teach at the university and when I deal with students, I emphasize that just as there must be struggle, there must be a pursuit for excellence. Raymond, by his life, repudiated mediocrity. And those of us who want our children to understand his accomplishment must know that excellence, not in dancing, not in sports, though all of these are important, but excellence in academic pursuits is one of the lubricants to getting to the society of dignity and justice of which he spoke. To those of us in this Germantown community, Judge Alexander's concern with individual civil rights should never be distorted. For when he spoke of civil rights, he was not talking about encouraging or tolerating crime. He was concerned about poverty and prevention of crime. But unfortunately, sometimes in our society, for a variety of reasons, we are not able to eliminate crime. And Judge Alexander recognized that this community in all should not be tolerant or apathetic to responsible methods to contain and to eliminate crime, and to treat those who rape and rob and burglarize of having violated the fundamental canons of the society. In recent years, many individuals have led a public distortion as to what the civil rights movement really meant. For political reasons, they've attempted to suggest that maybe if you are for equal opportunity for women or for blacks or the poor, that you're soft on crime and that you are oblivious or unconcerned about the rapist or the burglar or the robber or the murderer. And one of the things which I think in this community and in all we must do is to demonstrate what Judge Alexander's concern was, and that was about victims of a system that treated them unfairly. And that we must be as much concerned about the victims of crime as we are concerned about the victims of poverty. The genius of the Germantown Mennonites in 1688, when they took a position where they had no political advantage, was that they were concerned about the victims of slavery. They were concerned about the kidnapping. They were concerned about what John Hope Franklin calls that horrible middle passage, where 15 million people were taken from Africa, 1/3 dying on their way, and vessels which were jammed so that individuals could neither move their hands, and many died from starvation. The genius of Raymond Alexander was that he was concerned about the victims of poverty, about the victims of racial deprivation. And we will pay the greatest tribute to him if we get that synthesis of a man and a community being concerned about the totality of the rights of all individuals. How does one close up a speech on an individual whose contributions are so profound that someday some men might say that considering his options, he did as much as a Jefferson or a Hamilton or a Frederick Douglass? I thought of quoting Frankfurter, Mr. Justice Frankfurter, excuse me, Bill, or even our great, profound thinker, Bill Coleman, or Holmes. When I spoke not too long ago before Judge Jamison, I concluded by making a reference to Churchill, because I thought to some extent Raymond and Churchill had many qualities similar. But upon thinking about it today, I recognize that even more, Raymond was a poet and a philosopher. And I will try to give you the lines which I submit, if I can recall them, from that great poet Langston Hughes' Dream of Freedom, which epitomizes the goals which Raymond had, which epitomizes the goals which he would ask that we seek, and which gives us a message so that the dream which was started in 1688 can be real in 1975 in this community. Langston Hughes in 1964 wrote, "There's a dream in the land with its back against the wall. By muddled names and strange, sometimes the dream is called. There are those who claim this dream for theirs alone, a sin for which we know they must atone. Unless shared in common, like sunlight and like air, the dream will die for lack of substance anywhere. The dream knows no frontier or tongue. The dream no class or race. The dream cannot be kept secure in any one locked place. This dream today embattled with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, it must be saved for all." That is our message and our mission which we hold, Judge Alexander.
To you, the esteemed family, the honored speakers with whom I share this occasion of homage and tribute, friends and associates of the late Honorable Raymond Pace Alexander, honored guests. Great men are many things, yet we are always amazed at their breadth of meaning. It is seldom that a total awareness of the puzzle we call personality, the maze of character, or of that ineluctable something we term personal affect can be explored by the people affected by a great man's life. That task is most often relinquished to the distant, objective historian. Depending upon the historian's skills and perceptions, the meanings and involvements of a lifetime can be interpreted with all the subtlety and grace of a masterpiece. We are extremely fortunate in being able to provide just a bit of shading to the portrait that history shall undoubtedly paint of Raymond Pace Alexander. We all know that the life of Raymond Pace Alexander has great significance to the history of American jurisprudence and to the history of Black Americans. He was a great man, but he was more. Through exploring our definition of ourselves as the greater Germantown appeal, we can only begin to realize the magnitude of the man. It is through our own definition that we see many more facets of this rich jewel of a man. We are representative of 16 community groups as diverse as could be found anywhere in this wide country. We are old, young, of some means, and without any. White, black, and with varied interests. Health, housing, economic development, community involvement, education, problems of the aging, problems of the arts. We form a consortium of organizations committed to the concepts of community through cooperation and popular self-determination. Our diversity alone gives us some idea of the breadth of Judge Alexander's interests. He encouraged us. He encouraged this very diversity. He said he believed in us, that people could be responsible to and for each other. We saw through his relationship to us a spirit of optimism that can only be acquired through having struggled as he had struggled. We saw him as a gentle champion who fought diligently and well throughout his lifetime the continuing battles against apathy, ignorance, insensitivity, and social decay. We were indeed proud that he chose to devote so much of his time and energy to us. We had thought initially that given our common obscurity and generally fierce idealization of community determination, we would be far, far too radical for the judge to espouse our cause, a kind of organizational chauvinism, naively so. Few of us had any acclaim beyond the Germantown area, and 3 years ago, state and federal government were still being widely accepted as the sole resolvers of human problems, the paternal sugar daddies of social agencies. The judge had been responsible for decisions which in themselves were considered radical. We were surprised and indeed pleased when he consented to be our chairperson, though. There have been times when we were actually shocked by the very radical nature of his proposals and the alacrity with which he could move and set us into motion. We found our relationship enhanced by time. He was, is our elder statesman. We were saddened by his death, but more importantly, we have been inspired by his life. He talked about the rejuvenation of this community. He did more. He participated in the processes for its renewal. We can only believe that he never saw human endeavor as being finite. Growth and change and assessment and change were a continued life experience for Raymond Pace Alexander. We have committed ourselves to carry on this spirit of involvement and quest for social justice so exemplified by his life. You see, he enjoyed life and communicated that enjoyment. He believed and communicated that he believed in the qualitative enhancement of life. He was more than a great man. He was, is intensely human.
Mrs. Alexander, and members of the family, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege on behalf of the chairman, the members of the honorary committee, and the Greater Germantown Appeal to thank you for joining today in this memorial tribute to Judge Alexander. My remarks will be brief and partake, so to speak, of both a formal and a more personal character. The formal tribute can find no better expression than the words of Mrs. Martin Luther King in a telegram sent to Mrs. Alexander on this occasion. This is Mrs. King's message. It is a high honor and a privilege for me to join the many friends of the late Judge Raymond Pace Alexander in a tribute to his memory. He was a very valued trustee of the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Social Change, whose belief in the American system and courageous candidness for his beliefs placed him among the giants of leadership. Superbly trained in an era when only a small minority of black people were able to afford higher education, Judge Alexander used his profession not for personal and selfish purpose, but for purposes which would advance the causes of justice and brotherhood, thereby ensuring the opportunities which are ours today. His exemplary life was a model which should be emulated. Coretta Scott King. A few years ago, when Judge Alexander became senior judge of the Court of Common Pleas, he relinquished some of his judicial duties, but as we all know, maintained an active interest in the court and in the community. Indeed, as he moved further from an active role as judge, he devoted increasing interest and concern to civic organizations. The Greater Germantown Appeal, of which he was founding chairman, reflected Judge Alexander's vigorous and optimistic approach to the problems of urban living. He had confidence in the viability of our community, and while he saw and understood its problems clearly, he believed that through joint effort, our combined energies could bring about the changes needed to improve the quality of life in our times. We of the Greater Germantown Appeal intend, with your help and the help of all whom we can rally to our cause, to continue this work for the Germantown community and our city. We feel it is, in a sense, a continuing and appropriate memorial to Judge Alexander, reaffirming his life of social concern and civic service. For me personally, this occasion has special significance, not only as an expression of respect and honor due Judge Raymond Pace Alexander as an outstanding citizen, but because of the many personal memories revived by this event. I would like to share two of my reminiscences with you because they illustrate facets of Raymond's personality which were dear to his friends. With all his elegance of dress and dignity of bearing, Raymond had a marvelous sense of humor. He was always sensitive to the feelings of others and rarely showed boredom or impatience with people. Despite this sensitivity for the feelings of others, he never took himself too seriously and enjoyed a joke, even on himself. One of the pleasures of my telephone conversations with Raymond in our work for the Greater Germantown Appeal was the amusement we both took from the elaborate forms of address I invented when I spoke to him. In casual conversation, I would refer to him as your judgeship, which seems sufficient, but at times, in an excess of dignity, nothing short of your honorship would do. These honorific titles, offered in tones of the deepest humility, never failed to amuse Raymond, and we got on to our conversation in a relaxed and pleasant vein. Helpfulness, I think, was Raymond's most distinguishing characteristic. He was always helping people, friends, acquaintances, anyone whose need came to his attention. He sought to help in all things, great and small. Only a few months ago, my daughter was married in this church. Just before the entrance of the bride, when the white runner was unrolled along the center aisle, there was a fold or wrinkle in the fabric at the very front, just below the first step. It was Raymond, sitting in one of the pews to my right, who got up, came forward, and knelt down to straighten the runner, to make certain my daughter would not trip as she went down the aisle. He was a dear friend, and I thank each of you for coming today to honor him.
I think you can tell how much personal pleasure it's been for me to work with Pat Clifford. She and I have been co-sharing this activity for the last year, and it's just been a personal delight to work with Pat. And I would like, at this time, to thank her for really handling all of the details of this tribute to Raymond Pace Alexander. And in conclusion, before we invite you to the reception where you can meet and greet Sadie Alexander and Bill Coleman and Leon Higginbotham, I would just like to say that appropriate to the spirit of this man and to the spirit of this occasion, and as Judge Higginbotham has said, it is important that we rededicate ourselves to the unfinished task. And those of us who live in the greater Germantown area, who partake of its history, who enjoy its diversity, who know of its wide variety of leadership resources, and those of us in the appeal see this as a clear opportunity to make good on Judge Alexander's dream of a rejuvenated and a reunited greater Germantown. Looking to next year, 1976, our nation's bicentennial, and to 1983, the 300th anniversary of the founding of Germantown, we feel that we have a chance to really make this a model to the state, to the nation, and the world. And in this connection, I would like to say on the part of the Greater Germantown Appeal that there are two specific steps that we are taking today to take us on that journey in the spirit of this great man. The first of these is in regards to a very kind offer by the city of Philadelphia. And I would like to read you a letter from the mayor. Dear Mr. McLean, the city of Philadelphia is happy to cooperate with the Greater Germantown Appeal in making available Worcester House in Vernon Park, known to many of us as Vernon House in Vernon Park, for your programs and those of your 16 constituent community groups. We feel this will be a particularly fitting memorial to the late Judge Raymond Pace Alexander, the founding chairman of the Greater Germantown Appeal. I applaud your efforts to improve the social services, education, housing, economic development, community organization, and cultural activities of the Greater Germantown area. We are aware that the Greater Germantown area is a viable community, and with the harnessing of the human resources of this general area, there will be a brighter future for Greater Germantown. I'm asking Recreation Commissioner Robert W. Crawford to work out an appropriate lease arrangement with you. He will be in touch with you in the very near future. Sincerely, Frank L. Rizzo, Mayor. I'm delighted that Commissioner Crawford and his wife are here with us today. And of course, we are most pleased that this marvelous old house right in the center of Germantown will become the center of the activities and the meetings of all of our 16 groups. The second thing that gives me great pleasure to announce to you today is this marvelous tribute that we're about to unveil before you, which really comes to us through the good offices of Reggie Beauchamp, the assistant to the president of the Philadelphia Bulletin. We went in to see Reggie. He's been helping us in the public relations area for the last year. About a month or so ago, when we were just beginning to prepare for the activities of this spring, and as was often the case, he was already ahead of us. He said, I'm already developing a permanent memorial plaque in memory of Raymond Pace Alexander. And that plaque is here today, and if a couple of my colleagues would unveil it for us now, I'm sure you'll be very, very pleased to see it. This is a plaque done in plexiglass, and it will be fitted to a walnut backing and will become a permanent part of our new headquarters at Vernon House. I'd like to read the inscription on it from Reggie Beauchamp. It says, in honor of my good neighbor and good friend, Reggie Beauchamp, dated the 2nd of February, 1975. And Reggie, on behalf of all of us, we want to thank you very, very much. Before I ask Rabbi Cherry to say the benediction, we would like to invite you all to the reception that follows. It's right through this entrance to your left over here, and there will be people to guide you upstairs to our refreshments, where you will have a chance to meet Mrs. Alexander and all of those of us who have participated in this marvelous tribute. And again, many thanks for being with us. Rabbi Cherry.
We've come to the conclusion of this memorial tribute. We've taken leave of our comrade in arms, of a fellow laborer in the vineyards of the Lord.
And we pray that the soul of Raymond Pace Alexander finds rest and peace in its heavenly abode. We have but one simple request to make, O God. It is the plea of Elisha when he took leave of his master Elijah. For Elijah said to him, "What may I leave you before I go? Depart this earth." Elisha answered, "May a double portion of thy spirit rest upon me." That's our plea. May a double portion of the vital spirit of Raymond Pace Alexander rest upon us and inspire us to carry forward the tasks that he has left unfinished. It is in this sense that we invoke God's blessing. Please rise. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless thee and keep thee. Yoer Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. May God's face shine on you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God lift his countenance unto thee and grant all of us and all mankind peace. Amen.